Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Aquarian Wisdom Festival, where we are opening portals to new realities so that we can truly architect a bright and vibrant future for all beings. And I am your host, Jocelyn Mercado, and the creator of this event. And I am truly honored today to be here with Keoni Hanalei. Welcome, Keoni.
Aloha, mahalo. Thank you so much, Sister Jocelyn.
So wonderful to be here with you today. Let me introduce you to everybody here, Keoni. So Keoni is a descendant of the Mu people, the inhabitants of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands before the migration of the Polynesians through his maternal grandmother's line. His maternal grandmother was a well-known healer on the island of Maui. Keoni was fortunate to become adopted by her upon birth and spent the first 5 years of his life immersed in ancient practice and mysticism. He is just one of a handful of practitioners who have access and are willing to share this ancient archaic knowledge, or pre-flood Ike. Fern medicine or emotional intelligence is one aspect of this Ike and dominates what he expresses today. This is the legacy of his lineage. Fern medicine is the awareness of the movement of emotions and the release from control fixation. Keoni is also versed in ancient, primal, meditative, and movement practices which incite cellular memory, DNA activation, and the comprehension of familial and lineal wisdom through the reading of the nervous system and the DNA. And so, Keoni, your topic today is emotional courage and the Waikau fern. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
It could be also pronounced Waikau. Sometimes we pronounce W's in our language as a V.
Okay, the Waikau fern, wonderful. But I would love to begin here just to speaking a little bit more about our ancestry, because it's really beautiful that you in your lineage, you have such a depth of knowledge about your ancestry and how far back it goes. So could you share a little bit with us about that?
Sure. Thank you so much for asking about that. I would love to share my lineage, my culture. And in the Hawaiian language, we call it mo'oku'auhau. Mo'oku'auhau means lineage. My lineage, we can trace back 20,000 years to 18,000 BC. And we have preserved that in chant. So it's oral documentation. We chant the names of our relatives, or 1,017 generations, back to an individual known as Mahat. And Mahat lived in 18,000 BC. We don't really know what occurred before Mahat. It's quite mysterious. What we do know about Mahat is that Mahat resurrected a lot of our traditions. One being something that we're going to talk about today, Pu'a Ehu Ehu fern medicine. And so we consider Mahat the founder of our contemporary lineage. And I always love saying that because, you know, when we, and many of us, all of us, come from lineages that span hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of years. So when I say 20,000 years, yes, that's contemporary.
Yeah, so incredible to know and have that. So you said it's through chanting, so it was passed on orally, this knowledge of the lineage.
Yes, and we also hold a lot of records in our what we call iwi kua mo'o, or our spinal cord. And in Mu culture, pre-Polynesian Hawaiian culture, we consider the iwi kua mo'o, the spinal cord, the Akashic record. It's the Akashic record of the individual sovereign, and it's also the Akashic record of a consciousness. So if we ever want to resource the memory, we would go into our spinal cord. And another tradition that Mahat resurrected is something called ulu. And ulu is a breathing and movement technique that really helps to incite that memory by way of the spinal cord. So we also have kept our records in the spinal cord.
Okay, wow, incredible. So it's within us. We can
Yes.
access it. So what recommendations would you have for those of us who we don't know that much about our ancestry, right? Like maybe I know maybe 3 or 4 generations back, really, and that might be it. What do you recommend for us to explore more, learn more about our lineage?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And the answer is actually really simple. The answer is to call it in. And, the reason why I say that and the reason why calling it in is so important is because many of us are so heavily influenced by the external conditions and the narratives of the external conditions. And even our translations of things come by way of how we're influenced by the external conditions. So I like to just recommend that people call it in, resurrect it from the innermost part. Of course, on a physical body, we can look at that as the spinal cord, allow the spinal cord to become friendly and generous, to make a disclosure of the lineage. Things that come through are going to be very unique and even very peculiar. And there's tendencies to want to shame that or censor that because it's not compatible to the exterior conditions of what it may look like, sound like, feel like, based upon the templates that we have in the exterior conditions. So this is really also a resurrection of a real sovereign self. And now me as a sovereign being making translations based upon what I feel, something that's unique, not so influenced by the external conditions. So calling it in, deeming ourselves worthy to hold that knowledge, to resurrect that knowledge, and to be an ambassador of that memory and that knowledge.
Okay, yes, absolutely. And that's what this event is all about, is to help us to shed that conditioning, right? Help us to let go of these old identities or constructs that we've been handed that we're realizing are not true. So I love what you're sharing here about getting to those deeper levels. And I'm just curious, in so many of the traditions, and this is something I've been studying lately, we have the knowledge of the chakra system and the knowledge of the Kundalini energy. And so I'm wondering if the spinal, the information stored in the spine, is that related at all to the chakras or the Kundalini energy, or is that kind of a separate thing?
It's completely related. And if we feel the chakra system, there's something even that predates the chakra system, and that's the dantiums, right? The lower dantium, the middle, the higher dantium. And that's really the culture to which I'm from, Mu. We have three within the spinal cord, three dantiums, or we call them the base is called unihipili, and that's feminine. Okay, the middle is called uhane, and that's masculine. And then the highest is called amakua. Now, the base would be the thorax, would be the sacrum, the lumbar, and the coccyx vertebrae. The masculine is the thoracic, and the cervical is the highest potential, which is the androgynous. So it's a consolidation of identities to arrive at the highest potential, which is that androgynous state. So it definitely has everything to do with the 33 vertebrae and that which is coded within the 33 vertebrae held within the cerebral spinal fluid. In the culture, we call that the EV-VI, the cerebral spinal fluid, and it's known as the human essential oil.
Okay, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing about that. And I would love to move into your main topic for today. So can you share with us what is fern medicine?
Yes, thank you. My favorite topic. So, like I was saying, one of the things held in my lineage is something known as Pua Ehu Ehu, or fern medicine. Now, in Pua Ehu Ehu, ferns, the spores of ferns, hold the codes to human emotions. Okay, now I want to take us all the way back, okay, prior to 18,000 BC, and perhaps even further back, okay? Many of us are familiar with the cycles that our planet experiences. Perhaps some of you are familiar with the language or the verbiage of the Kali Yuga. The Kali Yuga would be like a spiritual dark age, okay? It's when a lot of things are in moratorium, when there's a lot of amnesia occurring. I first want to just share that yugas, cycles, are not malicious. It's sophisticated, meaning you and I and our ancestors, we didn't do anything wrong, right? It's inevitable. It's a law of nature, cycles. Okay, it's how quantum and linear dance, cycles. However, because the Kali Yuga is determined by, like I just shared, it's really a state of amnesia, of forgetfulness, and even the opportunity for corruption. There was commotion that, wow, the human emotion in its totality, uh, there was concern that they might become somehow polluted or distorted in a way. And so there was a need to preserve the emotions to ensure that they would not become corrupted. Now, ferns are very, very unique on our planet because they are the only known species to have experienced what is known as evolutionary stasis. Evolutionary stasis means that something has met its evolutionary ceiling. It's evolved, it's complete. The important thing about that is that this means that this species is no longer required to accumulate data.
Mhm.
If something does not accumulate data, it cannot become corrupted. And so the ferns volunteered and the ferns were chosen to hold the codes of human emotions until the time became, as we say in the language, hemolele, or perfect, to be gifted back to the humans for proper, responsible integration and expression. And I always love, the fact that we're having this conversation now means that the time is hemolele. And like, this is a summit on the Aquarian age. So it's another indication that we are now approaching and in the beginning stages of the Aquarian age. The most common question I get regarding specific emotions in correlation to the ferns is, what's the fern of love? And this is important for me to clarify because it's going to give a little more depth to what fern medicine is. So there is no fern of love because love, okay, aloha, is the culmination of all emotions. Now, love in its totality is too colossal to be held in a structure, meaning an animate world that you and I are experiencing now. It's too colossal to be held in a structure, and therefore it was fragmented into 103 pieces. These 103 pieces are the 103 emotions to which you and I must begin to integrate, indoctrinate ourselves in order to reach that space of aloha, love in its totality, at which point your body, my body, this animate world will collapse because it can no longer hold my structure. This is what we call hala, or ascension.
Wow, so powerful. So there are 103 emotions that we hold within, right? That we're capable of experiencing, if I'm understanding that right. And so would you, I'm just curious about this idea of that they've become, some of them, I guess, have become corrupted within us, right? Or maybe all of them in different ways. So we have this potential to heal where those corruptions have occurred, and the ferns can help us with that. Am I understanding
Yes.
it right? Okay. Yes, it's so powerful. And this idea of evolutionary stasis, when you mentioned that if something can no longer accumulate data, it cannot be corrupted. And I'm thinking, wow, we as humans, we're certainly accumulating a lot of data these days. So
Yeah.
we really
Yeah.
need the help from the ferns.
Right, right. And, I appreciate what you're saying, clarifying with me about the power of the medicine, because I'll give you an example of an emotion that's been corrupted,
Okay.
and its true essence. And a great example is the fern Palai Hina Hina, which is the fern of grief.
Mhm.
Grief. I had a conversation with Palai Hina Hina, and this fern asked me, "What is your perception of me?" I said, "Okay, based upon experience, based upon my translation of you now, it's loss. It's loss." And Palai Hina Hina said, "I'm not about loss. I'm about completions."
Mm.
It's the honoring and the acknowledgement of a completion and the ability to let go. And of course, now that I'm aware of that divine translation of grief, my life has become a lot more fluid in that sense, because its divine translation has become more relevant than its distorted translation. So that's an example of making these shifts into the divinity of the emotions rather than some of the mistranslations.
Wow. Okay. Very beautiful. So this fern that you are going to share with us today, the Waikau fern, how does this fern teach us about courage?
Ah, yes. Now, courage, there's a mantra, okay? There's a saying that we have with Waikau, with the Fern of Courage, and that's Pa Vale Pu'uvai, and that means open the heart wider.
Mhm.
True courage in its essence is all about the skill and the capacity to share and to receive. And the sharing and the receiving must be done in honesty. Honesty must become more relevant in the sharing and the receiving than the dishonesty. Now we can feel and look at these two energies, right? Honesty and dishonesty. And then we can look around our world, and there's recognition that we've placed ourselves in a collective of war. And war is the result of incredible dishonesty for whatever reason, right? The assumptions have been made more relevant than clarity and honesty. And so Waikau teaches us to show up, to open the heart wider, 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 to share, clarify, and then also the skill to receive the clarification of others, regardless of how uncomfortable or inconvenient that is to me, to no longer scrutinize or manipulate the truth and the honesty of others and myself. And I always like to say this, Jocelyn, when we talk about opening the heart wider, I want to clarify, there is more than enough space. There is more than enough room to accommodate all of our truth.
Wow. So this feels to me like courage being a combination of vulnerability, right? Where I'm willing to share fully, but also acceptance of others being in their vulnerability. Do you agree with that
Yes,
word? Yeah.
that's a beautiful way to describe courage. There is this beautiful thread of vulnerability, which is necessary. And then there's also this acceptance that I must accept the truth of others without attempting to manipulate it in order to make me feel more comfortable. Beautifully said, sister.
Yeah. And it's just so critically important for us in these times, I feel, these very catalyzing, initiatory times that we're in, to be really willing to get outside of our comfort zones, to be really willing to be with discomfort, because it's coming up in so many ways and
Yeah.
we can't run from it. So
Yeah.
yeah, really important for us now. So, so how would you say that it's important for us to work with courage at this time?
I like to share how my kupuna said to me. They said, boy, because they always just call me boy. When you hold, when you have, when you know, when you honor your honesty and your truth, all you need do is speak. We're going to have to become exposed. And that's really scary for a lot of us, because there's something that has dictated most of our lives for our entire lives, and that's called shame. And you know, when I was saying, call in your kupuna, call in your ancestors, call in your lineage, that to which comes out of you, it's likely not going to be compatible to the structure that war has created and has sentenced most of us to align to that. It's going to be wildly different. But will you still have the courage to speak that, to commit to that, and to apply consistency to that, regardless of the condemnations and the shaming and the scrutiny? Because here's what happens when I apply consistency to my truth, then people will begin to believe me. Then other people will begin to respect me. And of course, this means that I have to first and foremost believe in myself. I have to be consistent with myself. I can't say one thing one day and then change it because it's uncomfortable the next day. It has to be consistent. And I always say, is it any wonder why we don't believe one another? There's so much inconsistencies. Let's allow one another to go into the space of belief so that we can arrive at the space of mutual respect. And the powerful thing about mutual respect means that now we're in mutual admiration. I want to ask you this, Jocelyn. That to which you admire, those to whom you admire, is there any way you can harm them?
In the admiration.
Right. Is there any way you can harm? No. That's the antidote to war. First, belief. I have to be consistent. So there's belief first within myself, and that to which I'm sharing as a contribution, not an imposition, a contribution to the external conditions. We arrive at respect. Now there's respect. Consistency always leads to respect. Then there's admiration. That to whom I admire, there's no way I can harm it. War is no longer relevant.
So it's a path to really truth and peace, right? When we have courage.
Yes. And just a reminder too, knowing that we're all going to have wildly different translations of our own truth. And to remember there is more than enough space to accommodate and to relish and celebrate all of our truths without feeling so incredibly threatened.
Well, I think this is something that's so important about the Aquarian age that we're kind of being birthed into right now, because in the Aquarian archetype, if we look to astrology, this archetype, it's very much about being unique and being an individual and actually really expressing the parts of ourselves that are, might seem crazy to some or might have not been accepted in our childhood, but it's like we're opening to the space where we can express that now. And so that's one thing that's standing out to me about what you're saying here. I think so many people, I'm sure many people listening are feeling this like, I know I have a message, or I know I have something I'm meant to share, or healing that I'm meant to be bringing to, or whatever it might be. But I've been told that's crazy, or I've been told don't go there, or just we've been taught to, suppress our greatest gifts in many ways. So yeah, it just feels to me like this working with courage in this way is just a critically important aspect of opening up our voice, opening up our self-expression to really bring those gifts that are needed at this time.
Yeah. And I love what you just said, to bring those gifts as they're needed now and as a contribution, yes. Right? Because the archetype of Aquarius is also that of a community. Yes. So we're being super unique, right? Super original, but yet we're showing up in a community and sharing that as a contribution. It's become a service to our brothers and our sisters. Yes. Foregoing censorship and shame, which has become so relevant. And I'm going to even go further. It's not just relevant for many, it's actually what's most relatable. That's how profane it's come. That shame is more relatable, meaning that I not only gift that to myself, that's who I navigate to. Those are the situations, circumstances, environments, and interactions to which dazzle me, right? So now, reaffirming what's most relevant in my life, and if there's anything I can share with people when you explore the power of courage, Cœur, it's French, okay? It means wholehearted. How committed are you to your core principles? How committed? And that to which you hold as your core principle. My kupuna would always say this, boy, don't be greedy, share. Share your core principles. We want to know. We deserve to know you. We deserve to love you, right? And I'll share this, Jocelyn. In the field and in the power of courage, Jocelyn, my sister, don't assume we know how to love you. You're going to have to teach us. Jocelyn, I no longer assume you know how to love me. I'm going to teach you. It requires me to speak.
Wow. Yes. Yes. Aho.
Aho.
Yes. Could you share a little more about that? Because I find that so fascinating as part of your teachings that yes, we don't know how to love each other. We need that information from one another's heart, you know, from the core of the soul of the other. So yeah, could you share just a little more about that?
I would love to. Thank you. And this has been like such a wonderful and scary journey for me as a sovereign individual too. Because we're going into deep vulnerability now, which ultimately feels so good. Feels so good to be disentangled. So in teaching others how to love us, of course, first and foremost, I must ensure that I have that capacity and potential myself. So I have to take myself through what I call the software of radiance, my core principles, okay, which needs to become the most relevant and relatable thing in my life. I must take it through the software of radiance. It has 2 steps. The first step is, do I even believe in it? Let's just say something simple. I am good. I'm good. I'm good. Let's take that through the software of radiance. Okay, Keoni, do you really believe you're good? Do you really believe it? Right? There's going to be all that doubt. There's going to be all the self-scrutiny, the self-sabotage that says, well, you did this once, or this person said this to you, which invalidates your good, right? So I like to call this the reckoning. The reckoning. Who says so? Who says so? I decide. My goodness, I decide. Okay, once I can truly believe in my good, okay, as a core principle of who I am and what I deserve from others, then I take it through the second step of the software of radiance, which is, all right, I'm holding good now in my womb space, in the sacred space, the mystic. And I ask it, good. Do I have faith in it? Ooh. Now, how do I reference faith? Do I feel safe? Does goodness offer me safety? If I'm rejecting that, I don't have faith in it. It's clear. So I have to make corrections in my own life and my perceptions and my perspective of who I am to ensure I have faith in my good. Once I say yes into belief, once I say yes to faith, now I have the authority to share that with my brothers and my sisters because I'm the evidence. I'm the evidence of good. Now I can teach you, Jocelyn, how to love me because I have the proof that it works.
Yes, so powerful. And yeah, these questions, I mean, you know, as if we, like me and everybody listening, if we let that filter through us, do I believe that I'm good, right? Do I have faith? These are really, you know, brings up a lot of
Yeah.
really deep, you know, feelings. And and this sense of being, you know, in some cases conditioned to think maybe we're not, to really question that essential goodness. So very powerful. And then as we evolve on that journey, so as I believe that I'm good, right, as I fully come into alignment with that within myself, then I can express that to others and welcome others to see me in that way.
Yes.
And trust that others will see me in that way.
Yes. Yes. Because that's your core principle.
Yeah.
That's your core principle. And our core principle is not just that to which we embody. Our core principles are also our contribution to a collective. And I can put this in perspective. Years ago, and I'm very clear about this, my contribution was hostility. I mean, that's the brunt of war culture. A lot of us are just showing up and offering hostility to one another, ridicule, shame. That was a contribution I made to my collective for a long time. Yeah, I said no. It's profane. It's a betrayal of the self, and it's a betrayal to other sacred entities. So, okay, deep breath, deep breath. What is my core principle? What truly nourishes me? That is going to be more relevant to me in my life. That's how I'm going to show up, encourage, make my clarifications. And this also takes us to, you know, when we clarify our core principles, the courage, and this is the vulnerability aspect too, is I'm also, it's going to be good to clarify that to which puts me in deprivation. Because what I'm doing is I'm clarifying my boundaries. And I say that this has a lot to do with vulnerability, because when I clarify that to which harms me, I'm also teaching you, Jocelyn, how you could harm me. I'm saying this is how I could be violated by you. But I'm teaching you that my nourishment is more relevant than that. The only reason why we're talking about these boundaries right now is so that I can ensure you don't violate me. And we've been removed from assumptions. You don't need to assume what violates me, what doesn't violate me. You can just ask me. Not a problem. I'll let you know. I'm going to be vulnerable right now. I know the only reason, right, in my past, the only reason why my community has made assumptions about me is because I've not been clear. Now, because I believe and have faith in my own principles, I will show up and clarify. And my clarification will be so exact that there will leave no room for any confusion. And this is really what we can gift to one another: the removal of assumptions. Confusion has so much hostility, so much isolation, so much dissociation. And our birthright as human beings, as conscious beings, is something known as intimacy. But a majority of us don't understand that because we don't experience it.
Yes. So this idea of clarity and consistency, and that's going to come through in all of our communications, right? And that is such a key way to strengthen our relationships and be able to open up to that intimacy. What else would you say about intimacy? I know this is such an important topic for us in our relationships and in our courage and how we move forward on all levels.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the other part of the aspect, right? Is like knowing when I'm being invited in the intimacy of another, in their clarification. And, you know, when people offer boundaries to me in my past, that would have been a trigger, because I would have felt right away I'm being rejected or I did something wrong. So I shut down right away before I can even allow myself to be intimate. So my approach had to, my perspective and my approach had to change to gratitude that someone has just removed me of assumption. and that someone is inviting me with clarity. Okay. Is it oftentimes going to make me uncomfortable and sometimes even violate my principle, other people's clarification? It's likely. It's likely. But I'm no longer geared to manipulate that in any way to make me comfortable, nor am I going to shut down because I feel rejected. Rather, I'm grateful for the clarity, because, you know, when we enter this field of clarity, we all experience something ultimately, which is really amazing. And it's one of the greatest like fabrics of courage. And that's something called relief. Relief. And in a patriarchy, that's one of the greatest illnesses is hysteria, overstimulation, excess. To gift a patriarchy relief is perhaps one of the greatest things we can offer right now.
Yes, well, so this idea of patriarchy is, I feel, is just this is a trigger point for me these days anyway, and I think for many. So would you share about the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine? Like, what are the roles of these parts of ourselves? And because we all hold both masculine and feminine within us, right? And
Yes.
and what are the sacred roles of these in their divine form?
Yeah. Yes. This is something wonderful that we could clarify, right? And I like to experience them as, you know, really affirming their sacred functions. And I just want to clarify, I'm a gendered male, but I'm 100% masculine and 100% feminine. My physical gender does not determine my energetic makeup. All right. Now, feminine, I was talking about those energy centers correlating to the spinal cord, right? We have at the base, the unihipili, the feminine. The feminine is really, the best way that I could translate it right now is the feminine is a noun. It's a noun. It's a state of being. It's the foundation. Things got to land. We have to place things. Things have got to land. And that's the feminine. She holds things, nourishes, nurtures. Okay? So it's the noun. There's a lot of safety in the noun. There's a lot of knowing in the noun. All right? It's a meditative state. Now, the uhane, okay, the thoracic vertebrae, the masculine, I translated her function as the noun. I'll translate his function as the verb. It's the action, the impetus. It's the engineer. However, the engineer needs instructions to incite the action, to create the structures. He needs those instructions by the feminine. She's in the meditative state. She's the oracle, offering the information, the template to which to build the structures. All right? We go into complete innovation and divine innovation, right? Because ultimately the masculine is saying, all right, I've shown up for duty. What is the energy of God? What does the energy of God look like, sound like, taste like, feel like? Guess who has those instructions? She does in her meditative state. She's in safety. However, there's a disconnect. The patriarchy has become arrogant. It won't receive instructions. At the same time, in the patriarchy, we're imposing this responsibility on the masculine, saying, make me safe, make me safe, make me safe. He has no idea what that means. At the same time, he's not going to ask for clarity or help because he's afraid of being seen as unfit, unworthy, unreliable, and unlovable. So he wings it. Not asking for help, not receiving clarity, existing in assumptions, and we arrive at war. Meditative state, action. Safety, security. Security means the enforcement and longevity of the safety. The other word for safety is faith.
Wow. Yes, and so there must be this dynamic interplay between the two, and when that gets cut off, we find ourselves in the patriarchy, I suppose, in this fascinating state that we're in now, that we're working on healing from.
Yes.
How can we? I get this is a really big question, so tell me if it's too big. But how can we bring them, our masculine and feminine, to wholeness within us?
I'll share it this way. The way that I feel it and the way that I'm experiencing it like now in my life is my masculine is in a cessation, removed from the stimulation, the hysteria, the crisis, and my feminine is in a resurrection. She's being removed of obscurity and neglect. I now deem her resourceful, critical, worthy, sacred, so that I can receive those instructions. And then with my masculine, who has humbled itself in that cessation, can now gather those instructions as tools to build the structures. My translation of what God, of what aloha looks like, sounds like, tastes like, feel like. The best way I can describe this is, any of the listeners, and when you're ready, my sister, go smell a flower. Go smell a flower. That's that flower's translation of God. That flower is in right relation of its noun and its verb. It has created a result.
Beautiful. And I have some right back there. And in,
in
the way that they look as well, they're perfect sacred geometry, right? Their beauty of their appearance as well.
Yes, yes, exactly. In the visual of them as well. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I have just one more question for you before we close here today. And it's going back to that idea of contribution that you mentioned earlier, right? And so I think we're feeling this so strongly at this time that we each have this sacred contribution, right? That each of us that it's like only I can do what I'm here to do in this unique way. And that's the same is true for every single one of us. And we're feeling that so strong. So what is your advice? What is the number one thing that we can do, or the first action step we can take to really root into our courage, right? And be able to bring that contribution forward?
Yes, I'm going to bring it back to locating your core principles. Okay. That to which nourishes you, not determined by the exterior conditions, but that which is completely sovereign. Once you apply belief and faith to that, you can then transfer that as a contribution. And this contribution is not going to be reliant on validation. It's a service. And I want to just share on behalf of the brothers and the sisters, my friends, when you show up in service, we are so grateful. There are more of us who champion you in your sovereign power, in your courage, than there are those who want to annihilate you.
Yes.
Most of the suspects to which we cultivate in our lives are imaginary because of some form of self-sabotage. Locate the core principles, the nourishment, make that most relevant in your life. You know, I just want to share in closing, I was a drug addict, I was homeless, I was incarcerated because of exactly what I was sharing. That which was most relevant in my life was hostility, and that was my contribution to my collective. I located that which nourishes me, and my life changed completely. I'm evidence. I'm proof.
Oh, so powerful, and such strong words for us to really receive and take to heart. This idea that those who will, condemn you, criticize you, whatever, are tiny in number.
Yes.
Compared to those who need you, There'll be
Yes.
so many people who are waiting for you to bring your contribution forward, and we'll be so glad to embrace you.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Keoni, for all of this wisdom that you have shared with us today. I am deeply moved. I know everybody listening will be as well. And I would love to know, do you have any projects or events or things coming up that you would like to share with our audience?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I do share monthly virtual workshops that anyone is invited to. If you go to my website, pohala.net, there's a link for workshops. I do what I call the emotional series. So I focus on a specific fern and a specific emotion every month. And we have a community share. We talk about this emotion, but I also take us into a lot of breathing and movement, just like I was sharing in the beginning of this call, of Ulu. So we weave in a lot of different ways and methods in order to fully integrate and realize these specific emotions. And I would love any and all of your company and your contribution. We have space where people share, and it's always so wonderful to just really learn everyone's translation. Remember, there's more than enough space. So, and also my Instagram, I share daily on different fern wisdom and emotional intelligence wisdom on my Instagram, pohala_botanical, Hawaiian_pohala_botanicals. I think I got that, Jocelyn.
We'll post it. The link will be right below the recording. I'll look it up and make sure we have a good link, accurate. Wonderful. Yes, and a link to your website is also right here below this recording, so everybody can go and check out all of your wonderful work. And you're offering as a gift to our audience as well 20% off anything in your online store, which includes the fern medicines, right?
Yes, yes. A beautiful array of fern medicines, fern allies to help you in your integration with the emotional intelligence. Yes.
Beautiful. So if I'll scroll down, you'll also see the button to go and visit Keoni's website and claim that gift as well. All right. Well, always such a pleasure to speak with you, Keoni. Thank you again for being a part of this event. Really wonderful.
Mahalo, mahalo, my sister, and mahalo to you all. Aloha.